Hey, everybody. It is Brian Nemhauser here for like the 53rd episode of Real Hawk Talk. It is officially the Seahawks offseason. Not yet the NFL offseason, but on this podcast tonight, we're going to be talking about what the Seahawks are going to have to do, what their opportunities are to be better than they were this year. And they were pretty good this year. So it should be fun. And as usual, we have our intrepid crew. We got the full crew tonight. We got Nathan at Nathan E11 on Twitter. Good to see you, dude.
Thanks. Good to be here.
And we've got Evan in Arizona, still batching it down there. How you doing, Evan?
I am doing so well. I am so excited to start talking off-season football. I think, Brian, you said it last podcast. The off-season might be more fun than the actual regular season. I'm not kidding.
It's a lot of fun. I love it. And that's at Evan on HB for those following along. And then last but certainly not least, we got at Real Jeff Simmons. I think you're in the States, dude. Is that right?
Yeah, man. I'm down in Florida. I had Shake Shack today. I know Evan might kill me about that.
No, Shake Shack is really good.
Oh, yeah?
No, it's super good. I mean, it has a premium price point, but Shake Shack has good quality burgers. Like, it's good.
But the shakes, though, can we talk about the shakes for a second? They're not up to the level of a place named Shake Shack. Like,
they're good.
I got a high bar for shakes, and Shake Shack is not hitting it.
Burgers are good, though.
Yeah, there you go. Well, welcome to the States. We're happy to have you for as long as we can. This is now the lesser. We don't actually have a functioning government right now, so that might be unusual for you to get used to. But we can walk you through that if necessary. Jeff, I'd love to have you walk us through the night, man. You have been chatting with us on the private DM about all the things going on. Where should we start with this conversation?
Man, there's a lot of areas we can hit on. We're gonna just to let everyone know. So yeah, the Seahawks are in off season now. The new league year starts March 13th, so that's almost 2 months from now. That's when the Seahawks are able to start making signings. They're going to be able to make trades, but as Brian said before, I think that we got to start internally. We'll start with the Seahawks. Brian said earlier, the team was good, surprised a lot of people. We all want them at Super Bowl level. We have Russell Wilson, Pete Carroll. You want this team at a Super Bowl level. So why don't we start with that? Let's go around the room. We'll start with you, Nathan. Nathan's probably the most realistic guy we got here.
About how to. There's some back there. About how to get back to a Super Bowl level.
No, we'll start with this. What's the one area of the team they need to upgrade?
Well, this was something that we were talking about today, and it's: do you want to? If you had to choose between offensive line and defensive line, which one would you choose? They obviously don't have to pick just one, but I think I would like to see them invest more on the defensive line, try to get a little bit more on the pass rush. We talked about this a lot last week. The offense overall performed pretty well. There's a lot of opportunities for optimization, I think. But they had a couple journeyman guards that they stuck in there. And that offense, they ran the ball okay. Russell had a really good year. So I think that if I had to pick just one spot to go, trying to find a couple of complementary pass rushers for Clark and Reed and in the mix there with Martin and Rasheem Green and stuff, I think that would be a great place to go.
Now, question for you. Are you saying that from a Pete Carroll perspective? Because I'm surprised you didn't say wide receiver based on your views of offense.
Yeah, I mean, this team has some needs. And I think that they need to address, they need to address safety, they need to address wide receiver, they need to address offensive line, defensive line. Like, they've got places to go, right? But if you told me I could only do one, I think it'd be pass rush.
All right, Brian, we'll move to you for a second. You've been pretty critical of the team's defensive talent. Is that the area you would go with, or do you look on the other side of the ball?
Man, as a tough question because, look, I think the team needs help at safety, cornerback, linebacker, defensive tackle, defensive end, offensive guards, both guards. tight end, receiver, kicker. There's a lot of needs. And I love, like, my favorite thing is watching the quarterback get sacked. I love when the opposing quarterback goes down. So it is, and I can really see a path to where the Seahawks could build a real strength. And I think maybe we'll get back to that a little bit later. I love the idea. A lot of teams try to spread themselves really thin and address all their needs. I like teams that build up a strength, and I think there's a chance to do that with Frank Clark and Jaron Reed and build a really dynamic defensive line. But if I had to pick one priority, it would be to make what I think is a decent offensive line, some decent building blocks, make that stronger. You've got a couple of free agent veteran guards. As I've said before, I really, really hope that the team doesn't just, say, oh, we know those guys, let's re-sign them. I think there's going to be potentially some really interesting players at the guard position. There's even some rumors of guys like Kelechi Osemele from the Raiders being a cap casualty. I don't know if we'll talk about that stuff later, but if you can get another really quality player, think about what Dwayne Brown has done to that offense. And, you add another quality player at guard. I'm pretty bullish on what the offense can do and how opponent independent they can be if they really have a solid offensive line.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. Evan, we'll finish this with you. And don't say head coach. We're only talking about the roster.
Yeah, no, I'll switch it up, actually. I would say, looking outside, for sure, there's some really amazingly talented pass rushers hitting the open market. I think there's some potential there with receiver even a little bit. Running back even has some cool names in it. But I really think, like, the biggest priority Seattle has entering this offseason is actually retaining some key franchise players that are currently in-house. People don't realize this. We're talking Russell Wilson extension. Okay, well, the Russell Wilson extension is big, so people are probably focused on that. But like Bobby Wagner, Jaron Reed is entering the third year of his deal. Had a massive year this year with 10.5 sacks for a DT, run stuffing DT. That's super impressive. Frank Clark, is obviously about to hit free agency. He is somebody that Seattle absolutely has to keep around. But to answer your question more succinctly, I really think the pass rushing talent is super impressive this year on the open market. I don't think we've seen something like this in a long, long time. You have Ezekiel Ansah, DeMarcus Lawrence, Jadeveon Clowney, Sue. You have a ton of really good pass rushers hitting the market. And if Seattle, and I'll tell you this right now, I have an offseason article coming out on Monday that gets into this, but Seattle has the cap space to afford a premium pass rushing talent in addition to Frank Clark and extending, all those key in-house free agents. So I say, to answer your question, is pass rusher. I'd love a 1-2 punch with Frank Clark. That's kind of the cliche answer, but Seattle has a lot of stuff to focus on this offseason. They got some big extensions, some big situations to address, and I think it's going to be really exciting.
Yeah. So I edited Evan's article last night. He's got a really cool article coming out next week, kind of running through all the big decisions that's going on. But quickly, just for those who don't know, I'm going to quickly run through the list of all the guys that Seattle has that are unrestricted. And this list might strike you as pretty surprising. Brian hit on a lot of needs. So quickly, I'm looking at the Over the Cap website, and it runs through the highest position guy based on who makes the most money. So we got Earl Thomas, he's almost a forgotten man, KJ Wright, Sebastian Janikowski, Justin Coleman, Shamar Stephan, Dion Jordan, Nico Thorpe, J.R. Sweezy, DJ Fluker, Frank Clark, Mike Davis, Mo Alexander, Michael Kendricks, Joey Hunt is not on that list. He's an RFA. So that's a lot of guys there. A lot to take in at once. What was that? 9 starters almost? 9 roster players. So let's kind of shift this conversation to those guys because that's a lot of names. Evan did mention they're able to to re-up a lot of guys, and that's not even including the guys who are up next year. Russell, Bobby, Jaron Reed's due for a contract soon. So just focusing on these 2018, 2019 free agents. We'll go back to you, Evan, since you're pretty keyed into that article. We'll go with a multi-part question. On that list, who's the one guy you really want to see them sign, and who's the one guy you really don't want to see them sign?
You're talking about you're talking about?
Yeah. pending free agents.
Guy, I really want to see them extend. I think the absolute must is Frank Clark. I think that's an easy answer. You have to keep him in the fold. Pete Carroll said it on 710 with Brock and Sock like a million times. They're not going to let Frank Clark leave. I think that's the correct decision. Even if you have to tag him, whatever, just get him in here long term. Please do not let him leave. Guy, I would like them not to sign. This might be kind of hot takey. Maybe not. It's KJ Wright. This team went 10-6 without him this year. He's obviously a good player. He's a contributor when healthy, but he's kind of getting up there in age. And I was really impressed with Michael Kendricks, when he filled in his replacement. And I know Michael Kendricks has a ton of legal issues that he's facing. I think just today we saw that his court date was delayed till April or May or something like that. But depending on the outcome of that situation, I think I'd rather roll with Shaquem and Michael Kendricks. I just don't feel like extending KJ Wright is the right decision. And I don't have a ton to back that up, but I'd just rather roll younger at that position. And I think KJ had an interesting quote recently where he was like, Seahawks haven't really talked extension with me yet, but I want to be respected and money equals respect. So, I think he could really get a good sum in free agency. And I am honestly hoping it's not with Seattle.
Do any of you guys disagree on KJ?
Not me. I think it'd be a mistake to keep him.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, given his age, his injury history, and the need to get younger at that position, hard to disagree. So for the rest of you guys, we'll go to Brian now. Let's leave Frank Clark out of this because I think we're all assuming he's going to be brought back on the tag. I think it's kind of when it happens. So leaving Clark out of this, Brian, who's the guy you want them to re-sign and don't want them to re-sign?
Yeah. So Justin Coleman's the one for me that's the most cloudy. And you're talking about a 26-year-old slot corner who's played well for the Seahawks, was one of Schneider's better trades in his time here. And I think that he'll have some market. And I don't think it's a guarantee the Seahawks are going to get him back. If you don't bring him back, there is not an obvious guy to step in and play that nickel corner. And now you've created another need beyond even the starting corners where we already said we want to add some competition. So that's the guy I would love for them to find a way to bring back. Young enough, talented enough. Wish he was better at tackling, although he did improve on the year. I think I noticed. As far as the guy that I would like them to not bring back, I'll go a different direction since KJ, I think we're all in agreement. Man, this is a tough one. I'd like them to let DJ Fluker go. And I know I'm going to get a lot of pushback from fans because how could you not love DJ Fluker on the Seahawks? His energy, his passion, the way he played, how tough he was, how much of a difference it was when he was in the lineup. But here's my reason. I think he's got a lot of injuries that are not injuries that just get better with time. I think he is going to constantly be in and out of the lineup. I think that he is going to command enough of a premium that based on, I think, playing reasonably well last year, that I just would rather them find another guard. I think there's other veteran guards out there that are going to be in similar price ranges that I'd be more interested in them bringing to Seattle. So that's one that I'm sure a lot of folks will disagree with me on.
So is that something you would rather upgrade with another veteran or bring back maybe Jordan Simmons and have him go at that right guard position?
I think everyone was a little bit quick on the Jordan Simmons bandwagon. I mean, certainly the Seahawks were able to run the ball well when he was there, but he did not play through his whole college career due to injury. Then he gets 2 games into his pro career and cannot play due to injury. So I think betting on that kind of player is not wise. I think absolutely bring him in, hopefully that he gets healthy and you can compete, but you cannot rely on that. I think you've got to go veteran on the offensive line. And something I've said for a while, for multiple years now. I think the Seahawks were absolutely right early on in saying publicly a lot of times, hey, colleges are not preparing offensive linemen for the NFL the way they used to. It's harder to find them. It's harder to develop them. That was all true. But what they missed was the next logical connection, which is to say, okay, if it's going to be harder to find good linemen and it's going to take longer to develop them, then veteran linemen become more valuable. And I think that people that are already trained and can already step in, and they really went, bargain hunting with Bradley Sowell and Jamarcus Webb back and during that free agent period. That was the last offseason where there's a lot of these good offensive veteran linemen available. And they missed out. They missed out on a chance to really solidify the line. So there's a number of pretty decent veteran offensive linemen that are going to be available this offseason. I think there's going to be more after cap cuts. So, that's why I think I'd like to see them add to the pile there.
That's an interesting opinion, and we'll dig into kind of the free agent targets we might look at from other teams later. But just to round this out, Nathan, how about you?
I think a big one that I would love to see back is Earl. I don't know that that's realistic, either because I don't know if he wants to come back. I don't know if they want him to come back, and his price point might not really be. I don't know. He's had a couple injuries now. I don't know that I want to pay a ton for him, but if they could find something reasonable to bring him back, that'd be pretty amazing. And then the other one that is also maybe not super realistic for bringing back is Michael Kendricks. We'll see what his sentencing ends up looking like and all that, but I was really impressed with him. I think that they performed quite a bit better with him on the field, and if he's another guy, if he can come back at something similar to what he came here for this year, that would really round out the linebacking crew pretty nicely.
Yeah, Earl's an interesting one because that was going to be my answer. I don't think it's realistic from John Schneider's perspective and based on how they've handled it. But given their problems at free safety and kind of the Super Bowl window, they've kind of taken a step forward. How else do you fill that position? And I'd be happy to pay Earl based on the amount of cap room they have, and Evan will get into that later, kind of digging into their cap situation. But why not pay Earl? I don't know. I'm struggling with reasons not to want to bring him back, especially since they're not probably going to get a comp pick for him. Evan, is this the cap number the problem or the age? Why not bring back Earl?
Yeah, I was going to in on this. I don't think extending Earl has anything to do with a skill thing. Like, people like to compare the Earl situation to the Cam situation. I think that is so insanely wrong. Like, Cam, when they extended him, his body was breaking down. Like, we knew that Cam was not like stable skill-wise. We could see the trajectory, although slow, like the trajectory was not good. With Earl, I don't think the trajectory's going down from a skill perspective. Like, free safeties, I bet Earl Thomas could play at a high level for another 3, maybe 4 years. Like, I think Earl Thomas is that much of a stud. So I think, to answer your question, it's not a skill issue. I don't even think it's a money issue. I think it's like a team chemistry issue. I think it's how do I put this? I think it's a team issue. Like, it's an emotional issue. Like, there's so much, I don't want to say drama, but kind of like controversy around his whole situation. I don't want to say there's like bad blood, but to commit that type of money to a player, you have to absolutely be sold on, his mentality within the team, how he gets along with executives. Like, an exec's not going to pay him $15 million a year if they don't like him. They don't get along internally. And I'm not saying they absolutely don't. It's just, I think my answer is this. I don't think it's a money or a skill issue. I don't think it's either.
I want to jump in on that one because I have a different read of it. What I see is I think Earl would come back. I think Earl does want to be paid top dollar. I don't think it's about bad blood. I think it's about the fact that especially John Schneider, has decided he does not want to give out third contracts, if at all possible. And I think that he's looked at, Cam Chancellor is due to be the second or third highest paid safety in the NFL next year. like they made some bad decisions on how they structured third contracts, and they're paying for it dearly.
My question is this: then, are we going to extend Bobby Wagner if that's the deal? Like,
that's what I'm talking about. That's what Nathan and I are both talking about. I don't think they will, and I think maybe they do because Bobby's been like, picture of health. He has not had any of the injury issues that have started to crop up for Earl. I think it is worth mentioning that is part of it. You haven't heard Bobby ever utter the words retirement. I think, look, I know a lot of people disagree with this, but if I was a GM and I'm looking for money on a player, and you've got a guy in Earl who has said publicly, thinking about retirement after he got hurt, and then, he talks about that he wants security because look what happened to his friends Cam and Richard down in Arizona last year. To me, the interpretation of that is he wants guaranteed money, so if he gets hurt again, he can walk away. That's what I hear. And like, that doesn't sound like a player who's like eager to play no matter what. And if you're going to sink that many millions into somebody, that's a big risk. So I know people don't want to hear it, but I think that there's a risk that Earl would just walk away if he got hurt again. And he's got hurt the last few years.
So here's a question, because the Cam contract was bad regardless if it was a third contract, the fourth contract, the second contract. They made a misevaluation on Michael Bennett from just a talent perspective. Maybe there was a locker room issue. That, in hindsight, looks like a pretty good third contract, doesn't it? Do you think that might change their thinking at any means?
That was kind of a weird third contract, though, right? I mean, or was it technically a fourth contract? Because he had the 1 year deal, and how did that all work out? Was it a?
I think. Are you talking about his 5th year option?
No, Bennett signed, I think, the end of the 2016 season.
So he must have signed. He signed the 1 year deal, and then he must sign another, and then technically, a third. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It seems like if they want to just make a blanket rule of no third contracts, you're going to have some Michael Bennett's in there, and hopefully, you'll offset that with better returns than what they got from Michael Bennett. But this is the old Eagles thing, right? Like forever ago, and I think Belichick has it now. Is you want to trade a guy a year too early than a year too late, right? And so if they adopt that and they stick to it and they actually trade these guys, I mean, what was the rumors around Sherman? A first or a second back in 2016 when they were talking about trading him? Earl was a second. They could have gotten some legit returns from these guys. I bet you get a first or a second for Bobby, right? And so as long as you're not sending away the Michael Bennett's for a fifth and a special teams wide receiver guy that you end up cutting, I think it's probably an okay way to go.
Can we all agree that one of the weirdest and maybe one of the worst personnel decisions the Schneider and Carroll have made has been Earl Thomas? I mean, what in the world? What in the world? If you weren't going to sign him, then friggin' trade him. Like, get a draft pick.
I would be honest. I think the Michael Bennett situation is even weirder.
You think so?
Yeah, because I'll tell you why. Michael Bennett signed a 3-year, $31.5 million contract in December of 2016. Do you know how freaking cheap that is for like a pass rusher? Like somebody as talented as Michael Bennett, the pressures, the sacks that he puts up at $10 million a year, that's a joke of a contract. And then to trade him a year later, that to me, the contract aspect of that makes no sense to me. The compensation makes no sense to me. Yes, the Earl Thomas situation is really, really strange. It's like a mystery of the world. But I think the Michael Bennett thing is even worse. I don't get it.
Didn't we get Dixon out of that?
Yes, they ended up trading up with the pick they got to get Dixon, I think.
So I mean, at least you get something. You got a Hall of Fame punter for Michael Bennett. You get a kick in the crotch for Earl Thomas. Like, you're lucky. Like, that's as much as you're going to get. Like, what? There is no sense. If you knew you were going to – at least Bennett, they knew they were going to get rid of him, so they got rid of him.
Yeah, but now you all three of you mentioned pass rusher as the number one need a year later.
I get – so the questionable whether they should have gotten rid of him. I get that,
Yeah.
but at least they like made a decision and they went for it. With Earl, like, what could they possibly been thinking that like they were going to compete for the Super Bowl this year, and so it was worth keeping him around? And
I mean, that was the rumor, though. That was the report, right? That they wanted to see how they would do against the Rams with Earl. So yeah, they thought they had. They had big aspirations, and it looks a lot sillier now at this point in the season. But
silly the whole time, Nathan. You and
I'm not saying totally. It's terrible because it's not just about this year, right? It's about building your franchise and year after year and winning forever and all that stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I was screaming all along that they needed to trade him because of this exact situation. And if you're not going to keep him, invest in your team and make sure you have something rolling forward, and don't leave yourself with 4 draft picks when you're trying to stock up on talent again.
And they did it right after they did it with Sherman too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sherman was going. They wanted a first or 2 seconds for Sherman. I remember reading Miami offered Jarvis Landry the year before for Sherman straight up, and then a year later they cut him for nothing.
I mean,
so
it's really, what this trend is, though? This is about this team making win-now decisions. Too many win-now decisions. Trading for Sheldon, trading for Dwayne Brown, that one worked out. Trading for Jimmy, trading for Percy. Not trading Sherman, not trading Earl. This is all about the team trying to do it all, now, and not thinking enough about the future.
That's an awful lot like the Pete Carroll philosophy of win forever, doesn't it? Huh.
Yeah, but more often than not, it's win now.
I guess I would say I think that this is a legitimate criticism of Pete Carroll in that Pete, it's not about he says it's about win forever, but he is so optimistic and he so sees the upside of every person in every situation that he does not account for risk. And he will tell you, he's been told, never make a fear-based decision. Well, that's fine, but you have to think ahead. You have to mitigate risk, or else your probability of coming out on the plus side long-term just reduces. So I think Pete got into a situation where both he was not mitigating risk by getting rid of players, and he was holding on to guys without letting other people come up underneath them to push them out. So I don't know. I think he shot himself in the foot, and I do think that he has an overly optimistic perspective on personnel, and I wish John Schneider, if he hasn't already, would have more authority there.
Yeah, and that's why I think Earl Thomas signing is almost the right move, because if they just let him walk for nothing, the whole thing seems kind of pointless and just a huge wasted opportunity. But yeah, I want to build on something you guys were just talking about, the win now decisions, the fun trades. That was kind of grim, so let's move to more of a fun segment. Antonio Brown has been the talk of the NFL. And anytime a player of his nature or his status comes available, every single fan base in the world makes the same thing. I can tell you from writing nationally, anytime a thing like this happens, every single fan thinks their team should get them. It happens in every city in the NFL. So Evan's struggling to stay awake here or ready to explode, one of the two. We'll move to him. I know you want a lot of offense. You want a passing game. Would you trade and make a win now trade for Antonio Brown?
Trading for Antonio Brown is not a win now trade. It's an implode now trade. That's what it is. Stop fantasizing about trading for Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown loves targets. Antonio Brown loves 200 receiving yard games. Antonio Brown loves 3 touchdown games. Who does this sound like? I like getting the ball a lot as a big tight end in the end zone. You really think this is Jimmy Graham's situation, but extrapolated to an even higher level? After every single game, when Antonio Brown gets 3 targets and 22 yards, we're going to say, why are we paying this guy so much? Why aren't we throwing him the ball? And it's going to be Jimmy Graham situation 2.0. Stop it. Stop it. He does not fit in this offense. He does not fit in this team. This team runs the ball. Antonio Brown would be wasted in this offense. Stop it. It's not happening.
What are they rumored to be trading for him? Do you what's the rumor? Anybody?
The rumor is that the Steelers aren't shopping him, right? Isn't that what I think that's the latest I heard, is that they're just like, we're not engaging in trade talks.
Wasn't there some story though about the Seahawks being a team that was looking at him, and was there any?
I don't know. I haven't heard a lot of real solid stuff on it.
It was kind of misleading headlines, I think.
Clickbait. I didn't click on it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of 49ers talk. I think Jerry Rice said that Brown badly wants to play in San Francisco. I think that was.
Well, yeah, he had a FaceTime call with his boy Antonio Brown, and he said that he really wants to play for the 49ers. I think that's a heck of a lot more likely than him coming to Seattle, and would make more sense. I agree with Evan. I don't think that this is if you're a diva receiver and you want to get the ball a lot, this is not a team to get that. I mean, we saw what the difference was when Golden Tate was here versus what he was in Detroit, which is a more high volume passing offense. He was a Pro Bowler, and I think if you had Doug Baldwin go from this team to like a Patriots team or something like that, I think Doug Baldwin would be putting up 110 catches a year. Like, I think he's that good, and he's been suppressed a little bit by this offense. So, yeah, I don't think it makes a lot of sense. I'm not a big fan of trading for more veteran receivers at all, and especially trading what probably be draft picks and young, cheap talent for old, expensive talent. Like, I just don't think that. But it's also interesting, I don't know, related to this a little bit. I don't know if you heard Golden Tate's interview, his kind of exit interview with the Eagles, but they were saying, like, where would you go? And he was basically saying, I don't have that many more years left. I want to go where I can win. And I don't know about you guys, but like when I hear a player say that, I don't think that's Seattle in most players' minds right now. Anyone disagree with that? Where a player's like, yeah, Seattle is just me away from being a Super Bowl contender.
Hell no.
I mean, they're not top of the list, at least, right? I think that you can go to Seattle and hope to win, but I don't think you can go to Seattle and expect to win Super Bowls right now.
That says something, guys. I mean,
we know where this team is, right? I mean, yeah, if you're ring hunting, this isn't the place for you. But like, I don't think that's a indictment necessarily of Seattle or where they are.
But isn't that like, Jeff? I mean, isn't that the ultimate question here? Like, I think we all believe that the Seahawks, with some moves, not anything crazy, could replicate what they did this year. Like, maybe get between, 9 to 11 wins, get into the playoffs, do a little something. I think the Seahawks are in real jeopardy of being caught short of contender status for many years. Like, this is a tough offseason to strategize. Like, what do you do? Do you trade a bunch of guys? You get rid of a Bobby Wagner while he still has value? Do you get rid of, do you cut a bunch of guys and try to get draft picks and try to, I don't know. Like, I don't think it's a clear path of how this team goes from what it is now to being a true contender.
What does that say about coaching?
Oh God.
No, I'm serious. But like, I'm not being hot takey. But like, as a fan, like, don't you want direction? Don't you want
It's not coaching though. It's personnel. It's you have good players that cost a lot of money, and you can only have so many of them, and some of them are aging, and you've got to turn over your roster. And no matter how good you are, you're not going to find Hall of Fame, All-Pro level players every draft. You're just not. So, like, it is hard. The NFL is made to not keep teams on top. So I don't think it's like, oh, this is clearly a coaching thing. I think, if anything, I would say it's a personnel thing more.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. And I know we spent a lot of time debating Pete Carroll, and Nathan would be a good guy to chime in on this next thing I'm going to say, because I saw him talking about it on Twitter today. How do we feel about John Schneider right now? I know we all like him as the guy running the team, but when we look at where the team is, and we mentioned the Percy trade, the Bennett trade, the Graham trade, do we overrate him?
Nathan. Did he freeze? He's just so stunned by the question.
Did I blow his mind there?
I think we lost.
What happened?
Nathan went on tilt.
He's still smiling.
I love how I'm gonna see if I can make him like the screen here. Hold on. Everybody. No, oh, he's gone. Never mind.
Oh no.
Dang
Blew
it.
his mind.
Evan, what about you, dude? You are a dyed-in-the-wool John Schneider fan. What's your response to Jeff?
I think that's a really good question. Do we overrate him? Maybe. Yeah, maybe, yes. But I will say this. I think John Schneider, when he takes an L, they're like really big L's. Like they're not really small L's. Like he takes big losses. Like you could name a bunch of trades, Sheldon, Percy, Jimmy Graham, losing Max Unger. Like the L's are big. Like Cam Chancellor extension was bad. I think even at the time we were like kind of shaky about that thing. But at the same time, like we were tweeting about this the other day. Like I think he's had some fairly decent hits as of recently. We have Frank Clark, Tyler Lockett, Chris Carson, David Moore, Will Dissly. A ton of. I can't think of the list off of the top of my head, but like if you look at recent drafts, they're not bad. Like they're okay. I don't think that's bad. Like I don't think you can expect a GM to nail 3 to 4 starters every single year. I don't think that's reasonable. So I think he's done a fairly decent job in the past few years. Definitely nothing close to the first 3 to 4 years of his tenure, but you could probably chalk that up to Scott McLaughlin or Pete Carroll.
Yeah, I think the first 3 years was just a perfect storm of having McLuhan running pro scouting. Pete Carroll knew the college talent pool inside and out. Like they don't get Richard Sherman.
And one thing I want to say on that as a fan, we shouldn't hold them to that expectation level because so many fans started following the team like in the early 2010s. Like that is not normal. That's literally like maybe the best stretch of, drafting in like NFL history for like 2 to 3 years. So I think holding them to that standard is really unrealistic.
Yeah. And I think that's a problem in Twitter overall. Like I see every year, like they wasted a 3rd round pick on Nick Vannett, or they wasted a 3rd round pick on Odiombo or something. And then you look at the history of like a late comp pick, 3rd round picks. They mostly wash out. And I know analytics Twitter is big on like the 3rd round pick is the gold. If you look at a lot of the guys that went in those zones where Vannett went, most of those guys have washed out of the league. So I think that was a good point. We got to kind of be realistic about what you can expect in a draft like last year where they get a lot of contributions outside of that terrible first pick. That's a really good draft. But I think overall, I think what Brian was saying is interesting. I think this is a really defining year for Schneider. I think it's a year where you kind of need hits. They only have 4 picks. They have a lot of free agent decisions, and for them to jump to contender status, they're gonna need to hit big on some of these free agents. So do you guys see it like that?
I mean, I want to jump in on whoa, I'm getting echo. The Schneider piece, I think you can make a case that he's underrated, and a case that he's overrated. So like the story has basically been 2010, 2011, 2012 were home run drafts, and then he's just been trashed since then. I would say 2013 was a trash draft. Everybody had a trash draft in 2013. It was one of the worst years of drafting in the history.
He loves that draft, though.
Like, it was so bad. So I throw that one out. I don't think Schneider was any better or any worse than anyone else. 2014, yep. That was not a good draft. It didn't work out. There was things. 2015, they got 2, what I think are essentially all pro players. Frank Clark.
Really a wash though. Like Paul Richardson and Justin Britt ended up being like pretty decent, serviceable players.
Yeah, no, that's I don't have it up in front of me. That's a good point, Evan. And you could look at 2016. There's
Aaron Reed.
Yeah, there's some promising pieces there, and then 2017, the Malik McDowell thing, a disaster, but there's some players there. And 2018 was solid. Like, I guess when you look at a draft, which I think is way more important than how you do in free agency, I think the way you judge a draft, if you can come out of there with one Pro Bowl level player or one All-Pro level player and everything else misses, that's a successful draft from my point of view in almost all situations. If you can get an elite player, elite talent, I believe is what wins in the NFL. And he's got a decent track record. I mean, I think you can look at almost every draft and there's somebody that is going to be not a Hall of Famer, a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro. And that's not easy. On the flip side, though, I think he's made some really horrible gambles. That's where I see him shooting. If he hadn't traded for Jimmy, if he hadn't traded for Percy, if he hadn't done the Bennett trade, the big name trades, I think have almost all gone the wrong way. Dwayne Brown is the one that comes out as like, okay, that worked out. But the smaller trades are the ones that have been good. It's not like he's bad at all trades. Trading for Chris Clemens, sitting at the end of Philadelphia's bench, one of Seahawks all-time sack leaders. Trading for Marshawn Lynch for a 4th-round pick, like obviously that worked out pretty well. I think Justin Coleman was a great get. I think it's when they try to go big, as Evan was saying, like the big ones on the trade side. That's where I would give him the most criticism. I think from a draft perspective, I would bet he's better than 80% of the NFL GMs out there, if not more.
Yeah. We often forget that John Schneider totally swindled Bill Belichick in that trade for Cassius Marsh for Justin Coleman. Like, that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, agreed.
Not huge names, but Justin Coleman, probably like a top 5 slot corner in the NFL, will probably make a good amount of money in this free agency. What did they give? Like a 7th-round pick and Cassius Marsh? That's pretty good.
Can you imagine the locker room picture of Schneider that Cable Thanos will be tweeting out after that trade? I'm making you uncomfortable, Nathan. What do you think of John Schneider, Nathan?
He's fine. We're glossing over a lot of bad. I mean, I don't know. I guess we're not really glossing over it because we talked about it a lot. Like, they're in a really bad spot because of all these trades that they made that were really short-sighted, and some of them were, kind of obviously bad from the get-go. Like, we knew Percy had issues. We knew Sheldon was on the last year of his contract. So
you didn't mention the Jimmy Graham one was a bad trade.
I don't think the Jimmy Graham trade was good. I think Jimmy Graham was a good player. But I think trading a 1st-round pick and a good center for an expensive tight end that you couldn't figure out how to utilize super well, I wouldn't call that a good trade. So yeah, I don't know. I think he's fine. I think that if you can't just take away before, like 2012 and before, but if you look at post 2012, I don't think you put him in the top 20% of GMs. I think he's maybe lucky to be top half.
Wow.
I mean, I'm not asking you to do it here, but I'd be super interested to see the GMs that you feel like have been consistently better than Schneider over that period of time. Like,
well, I don't know that
there's a lot of that. There are some. I'm surprised you think it's that many.
Well, and I think a lot of these guys are kind of the same, and I think Schneider got really lucky, which isn't really an insult. But that 2012 draft, that was a lucky draft, right? Like the Legion of Boone coming together with a bunch of late-round picks, like that's not like something that you can do over and over again. And so you can give him a lot of credit for it, but it's also not something that you can expect him to replicate. And so I think he's just a guy. Like, he's done some good stuff. the Frank Clark pick, which again was a little lucky. I mean, that had a lot of circumstances around it, right? The domestic violence thing that caused him to drop way down into the end of the second round, or wherever he was in the second round. So that was, him pouncing on an opportunity. But there's other stuff too with the Lockett contract and stuff like that. That's starting to look really good. But I don't know. It's not that stellar of a track record since the early couple years.
Yeah. And Brian mentioned the key to a great draft is hitting on those Hall of Fame kind of players. Look at their history with first round picks. Right? They haven't hit on one since Earl. Is Bruce Irvin hit?
They need to stop trading down. I'm tired of it.
So that's a good point. That helps me move on to the next thing I want to talk about. Is this, we haven't really hit on what we want the Seahawks to really do other than the position they need to get better at. So right now they only have 4 draft picks, which is kind of alarming considering all the needs we're going to talk about in the next couple of minutes. They have 4 draft picks. Evan, what's their cap situation?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So Seattle looking into this offseason. So right now they have about $52 million in adjusted cap space. What that means is, so in the offseason, there's this NFL rule called the top 51 rule, where basically it's a rule enlisted by the CBA, which says that NFL teams only have to account for their top 51 contracts, by total cost, their cap hits in the offseason. So they don't have to they only account for those being under the cap, if that makes sense. So they've got about 52 mil there, which is a ton of money. There's several situations that are really interesting that can open up a ton of space. The biggest one is Cam Chancellor. Cam Chancellor, and I go into this in my article on Monday, but Cam Chancellor has some really interesting injury guarantees in his contract. And the specific language of his specific contract, his injury guarantees exercise depending on whether he can pass a physical at the start of the new league year. So we don't really have a ton of insight into Cam Chancellor's neck and how his body's looking right now and everything like that. But if Cam Chancellor can pass a physical by the team doc, his injury and he's deemed able to play, on a physically healthy level, he's not injured, his injury guarantees will not exercise for his 2019 base salary. That's a big, big deal for the Seahawks because we're talking the difference between $2.8 million in cap space. If he fails his physical, the injury guarantees exercise. It protects him. It protects his 2019 base salary. It's like a portion of it. I think it's like 6.8 mil. If he does pass that physical, Seattle can cut him as healthy. The injury guarantees don't exercise, and it's like an additional 10.2 or 10.5 million cap space. I forget which one it is. So that would raise the number right there to 62 million. So we're not just dealing with 52 million, we're dealing with 62 million. Then you've got a couple other contracts that are, I think, really easy potential cuts that I also go through in the offseason article is, and a list of names real quickly. Ed Dickson he was serviceable this year. Actually had a decent connection with Russell, on some key third downs in the red zone. Was actually kind of impressed by Ed Dickson this year. But depending on Will Dissly's, recovery, we'll evaluate that. Opens up a couple million. The biggest one is Mingo. Really underperformed this year. Jacob Martin really stole his role towards the end of the season. There was some stat I found where he averaged less than 20 snaps in the last 6 or 8 games of the season, and Jacob Martin was just totally stealing his role. So I think cutting Mingo was 2.5 or 3 million in safe space. I think that's a no-brainer. You don't pay $5 million a year. That was his cap hit for 2019. So I think he's an easy cut. Jacob Martin is promising young, and I think he has some potential. The third one, Jaron Brown. That was Brian's offer. He cutting him would net another couple million. Long story short, we're dealing with somewhere between 55 million and 70 million in adjusted cap space. And once again, what that means is Seattle does not have to account for all top 55 players in the offseason under their salary cap. They only account for the top 51 most expensive contracts. So, considering all these big extensions that the Seahawks have to do, Russell Wilson, Frank Clark, Jaron Reed, Bobby Wagner, Justin Coleman, G.J. Fluker, J.R. Sweezy will make pennies. But, all those guys, if they want to bring in a premium pass rushing talent, Seattle has money to work with. And the one key point I want to hit home on this is when they are extending key players and you hear these big-ass numbers in the media like, 35 million average per year, 20 million average per year. NFL contracts are not structured, so it's like $21 million every single year. You know what I mean? It's like the contracts gradually rise in cap hit as the years go on. They're backloaded. The money is backloaded. This is good for NFL teams. My point is Seattle has a freaking ton of cap space, even moving beyond 2019. 2020, they're looking at 110 plus million. Like, they have so much flexibility over the next few years. They have a ton of money, a ton of different directions they can go in. Long story short, money is not a problem right now.
All right. That was like the speech Will Ferrell gave in the debate scene in Old School. Evan might have just blacked out. Basically what he meant to say, Seattle has a lot of cap space. They're top 10 in the league, I believe, in cap space. Cam Chancellor could open up more. And with just 4 draft picks again, they can be very active in free agency for the first time in a while. So Brian asked us to kind of dig into the free agent list and look for targets that kind of fit their needs and guys that kind of fit what Seattle's done in the past. So Brian, we'll start with you. You mentioned defensive line. You've mentioned guard. Who are 2 guys that jumped out to you looking at the free agent list that you think are good fits?
We're talking about guys that are going to be unrestricted free agents. We're talking about potential rumored cap casualties as well.
Either way, 2 guys you're really interested in.
I was supposed to be prepared for this one, I know. So I'll give you a few names. I think a couple that may not be as well known or at least as discussed. So I think Christian Covington is an interesting name, defensive tackle for the Texans. Young player, I think he's 25. I think has a lot of upside, good run defender, has some good pass rush to him as well. And I think he's probably a B-list free agent. I think could be someone that you could have. And you add another playmaking defensive tackle next to Jaron Reed. I think that's a really interesting, assuming you're also going to get Frank Clark back. Another name that would be much higher priced, and we'll see what happens with Atlanta, is Grady Jarrett. So I know a lot of people have talked about Jadeveon Clowney, and it's fine, but I think there might be some defensive tackles that are worth looking at. I think Jarrett was actually for people that are fans of advanced analytics, they've been paying attention to Grady Jarrett, but he does not light up the classic stat board quite as much. I think he's one of the top 5 to 7 defensive tackles in the NFL last year. And he's going to be a free agent. Atlanta's going to try to create space. That's an interesting one. And I'll just go all defensive tackle here for fun. I think Jared McCoy is rumored to be a cap casualty in Tampa Bay. He'd be a perfect addition where you're not going to have to commit long-term dollars to him. He's, on the downside of his career for sure at his age, but this guy has been one of the most dominant defensive tackles in the league, and he definitely has something left. So, you put him next to Reed, I think that's a really interesting core to your interior line. So those are 3 guys. I could go on about some offensive linemen and other stuff as well if they don't get named, but those are 3 guys I'd start with.
Those are interesting because I mentioned earlier Shamar is a free agent. And if you can turn Shamar into one of those guys and pair them with Puna and Jaron Reed, that's really building on a strength of an area they could really make them jump the next level. So defensive tackle, defensive end, that's areas to watch. Nathan, where do you want to go?
Well, I think that they need help at wide receiver. And John Brown's a guy that I think could be a really nice fit for them. I've liked him for a while. He's had some ups and downs. There's been some health stuff, not injury stuff, but just general health stuff with him. But he seemed to put it together with Baltimore, and could be a really good fit for this team. I don't know. There's a lot of kind of interesting middle of the road guys, but I wonder if there's not a more interesting use for Seattle's cap space. Like we saw Brock Osweiler get traded with a second round pick, basically into cap space. Could Seattle do something similar to that and maybe take in Joe Flacco and a second round pick, or one of these other just bad contracts and use it to get a pick and try to put the money to work that way? I'm not the cap guy, so I don't know what the realistic scenarios are, but we've seen it. I think there was another situation where I think that happened. It wasn't just Osweiler. So if that's something that the NFL is starting to do, I might like that more than spending some money on the next Jerome Brown or the next Ed Dixon or whoever it might be.
Yeah, it's pretty telling that a lot of the names Evan mentioned were guys they signed last year.
Mm-hmm.
So we probably want to be in a scenario where we do avoid that situation, because if you're just cutting guys a year later, and we've had the comp pick debate a million times on this show, we want to see them making better free agent decisions. So Evan, without giving away your article too much, who are guys you're looking at for Seattle?
Yeah, obviously we spoke a little bit about pass rusher. This may be fairy tale thinking, but I really would like to see them invest in the kicker position. We're going on 2-3 years of, really crappy kicking experiences. Seabass, come on, let's not take him for another year, please God. Kickers are not super expensive. That's why I don't think people realize. People think like top tier kickers are making like $8-9 million. No, they're making like $3 million a year. That difference between like, a crappy one and like a really good one, to me, is worth it. I want to feel confident in our kicking situation again. Steven Gostkowski, New England Patriot, longtime New England Patriot, is a free agent. That's kind of a weird one to look at, but we talked about wide receiver a little bit too. Golden Tate is an option. One name that actually, Brian, that you brought up that I'd like you to speak about, and I dug into a situation a little bit more and was intrigued by him, is Tyrell Williams. Mm-hmm. Want to talk about him, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, he stood. I was surprised he was a free agent. He stood out for me this year on the Chargers. He's been a deep threat. I think he averaged like 16 yards a reception this year. He's 6'4", 205 pounds. He's 26 years old, and just played well for the Chargers this year. I mean, he's not their first or second option, but I think he's an interesting guy to look at. And he's got, I think, 5 touchdowns on the year. Could be a guy that you get on the upswing. And I think 6'4" guys that like the deep ball, it's a pretty good match with Russell Wilson's, skill set. So I think that one is interesting.
Yeah, I guess Evan,
I don't think he'll demand too much market attention either. I think you could get him fairly cheap. I wouldn't pin a specific number on it, but you probably get him for less than like, I don't know, $4 or $5 million a year. Maybe that's even really high. I don't know. But he's one of the under the radar receivers that Seattle could add. And one area we haven't really touched on is Doug Baldwin is 30 years old now. Isn't that crazy to think about? Whenever I think of Doug Baldwin, I think of his like young 22-year-old like UDFA face of being a rookie in the league. So Doug Baldwin's getting a little older. Injuries are starting to creep up. Love Doug Baldwin, but I think it's time to start looking for his replacement. Not saying you cut him, but I think you need to start thinking about the next receiver that you pair with Lockett. And I don't think there's somebody in free agency that you replace long-term, as that second option or that first option, but there could be like a bridge gap year for sticking a receiver in there. So I think the receiver position needs some attention.
I need some attention for a while. I mean, right now you're I think that they should have done something about it last year. They've had opportunities for a few years now to add some talent there. And now you're at the point where you're kind of hoping and praying that Doug stays healthy and that David Moore takes that next step, which both are, certainly possible, but I don't think that if you're trying to contend, seriously contend, that those are two gambles you want to be making.
What do you think about Philip Dorsett? 26 years old.
He's a bargain basement guy. That would be kind of fun. He's kind of in that same mold as like a Tyler or a Doug or a John Brown. Obviously far less successful. Didn't really put it together in New England, which is a little concerning. That's a good place to put up some stats, but he would certainly be cheap, I'd expect.
Yeah. I mean, Nathan, where would you want them to spend resources? That place you'd want them to spend draft pick, free agent dollars, trade? Like, what's your instinct there?
For wide receiver, I'd love to see him to use a pick. I'm not. I haven't dove into this draft class yet, but like, what is it, Hakeem Butler? I like him a lot. There's a couple guys out there that are interesting. But yeah, I would like them to maybe think a little longer term at that spot. I think you can do a lot of stuff with like a Christian Covington on the defensive line. It's a guy that can step in and just kind of play and be serviceable, and that's fine. I think tight end's a great spot to go for a veteran because they have a higher learning curve, and because I don't think this team needs a particularly special tight end to for the offense to work. And so that's a spot that you could go veteran and maybe kind of another Ed Dixon type, but wide receiver, I think you try to get somebody that's going to be here, grow with Russ and be here long term.
Question for you. One name that this is a question for all of you. One name that we were excited about last year was Dante Moncrief. Potentially flying under the radar last year, got a little bit more money than we expected from the Jags. Is he somebody they could take a flyer on this year?
I've never been a big fan.
He's kind of the same deal as Tyrell Williams, though.
Yeah, he is. And
so, last year we talked about him and thought he might be pretty affordable, and then he got like $10 million. So, and then he did like nothing, I think, for the Jags pretty much. So maybe he'll be cheap this year. Maybe I wouldn't be surprised if Moncrief is the cheaper option between him and Tyrell Williams. I wouldn't be surprised
100%.
if Williams ends up getting that kind of Moncrief deal.
Yeah, I think Williams is going to be sought after. Anyone that's under 27 as a free agent that's coming off of a good year that's why Christian Covington is not a household name, but I think he's going to get more money than some might expect.
So just to follow up on that real quickly, Dante Moncrief actually had a better year than I thought he did. He had 668 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, I know that's not great, but like that's better than I thought he had.
Who are the examples of these wide receivers that get that like $8 to $10 million? These middle tier guys. Who works out? Who are the success stories there?
Tyler Lockett.
Well, Tyler Lockett with retain. So I'm just talking about guys that go on the free agent and get paid somewhere else.
Oh.
Yeah. But yeah, Tate's one.
Wes Welker at the time.
Well, they traded a 2nd-round pick for him. Right?
Oh, yeah,
They went after him.
That's a great question. I'm looking at contracts right now.
Who?
Percy Harvin.
Percy Harvin, great example. Yep.
Yeah.
It feels like every year we see
about spending money or trading for a receiver. Like, I just, it's not where I'd spend the money. I think Golden Tate's interesting. I don't think he's going to come here. I actually think there's some other positions we should talk about as well. Like,
that's
Jeff, you've talked about linebacker, like Anthony Barr. Even a guy like Thomas Davis, who's old and is going to be super cheap, but is pretty damn good still. Like Michael Kendricks, who's pretty cheap. I don't know. I think that's an interesting one. I think offensive line, offensive guard, we should talk about that. Probably one of the biggest needs.
So, Brian, you don't want to sign Fluker, correct?
My position is I think they can do better. I won't be upset if he ends up coming back at a reasonable deal. Like, I loved having him on the team, but I will be disappointed if they can't find someone better. Like, I'll give you a few names that come out for me, like Andy Levitri from Atlanta. He's old. He's 33, but he is a Pro Bowl level guard coming off an Achilles injury. He should be super affordable. I don't know if Mike Iupati is worth even thinking about at this point. He's old. He has not been great lately, but he's a strong player. I think Ramon Foster from Pittsburgh is another veteran guard who's been really good, and he's going to be out there and available. I think Eric Kush is a guy who's 29. I would love the Seahawks to look at him. Really strong, younger guard. Does not have the injury history of some of these other guys. He's going to be there. Roger Saffold from the Rams is going to be a free agent. He's 31. There's a pretty decent list of guys that are going to be guards that are available on the market. Jeff Allen from Kansas City, interesting guy. So those are just a few names that kind of jump out to me.
And what do you think? What do you think about Sweezy? What do you do with him?
I'd sign Sweezy. I think his injuries don't project as something that are going to be as chronic, or he had a broken foot. He's going to heal from that, and I think Sweezy is a better pass protector than Fluker is, and so I would rather, which I never thought I'd ever say Sweezy's a good pass protector, but he's gotten better. I would keep Sweezy. I think he's a better two-way player as a run and pass blocker. I don't think he's great, but I think he's a good fit. So I would try to keep him.
Yeah, I agree with you. What my big takeaway from the games this weekend was how good the four teams that won, and even Philly, how good their offensive lines are. And Seattle, as much as we praise the development all year, watching those four teams, the quarterbacks are great, the passing games are great. But to me, just watching all four of their offensive lines, looking what the Rams did to the Cowboys after Seattle fell in their face against them, that's an area that still needs to get a lot better, in my opinion. And the two guards are a big deal. What they do at right tackle is a big deal. So, yeah, free agency is a big area to me where you can use the guard to get you better, because even if they bring those two guys back, can you really expect the same level of performance, or do you want to go elsewhere? It's a tough decision they have.
Well, let me pull up a couple stats that Brian actually gave me. I'm just pulling it from the article, scrolling down real quick. These numbers will kind of shock you with how bad J.R. Sweezy and DJ Fluker were this year. I think early in the year, like maybe it was like this Tom Cable phenomenon where like we weren't so outrageously bad that like bad was like a huge step up. But like I want to give you the stat. Out of all guards, and Brian, is this okay to share this from Pro Football Focus?
Yeah.
Out of all guards with a 50% snap rate, PFF ranked Sweezy 49th in pass blocking and 51st in run blocking. Under the same criteria, out of all guards with a 50% snap rate, Fluker was ranked 18th in pass blocking, which actually was a surprise to me, and 49th in run blocking. I don't know how much credibility we give to Pro Football Focus, but I think they're a reference point, and that's pretty bad. Like, that's bad. I think giving either of those guys anything over $2 million a year even seems very questionable. Like, we can't give those guys big money or like medium money or small money. That'd be bad.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I mean, I think if you can get the Seahawks offense, I know we have a lot of debates about this, but they were the fourth highest scoring offense in the NFL, and were definitely better when Fluker and Sweezy were in there. I don't think that they were a dumpster fire. I do believe that they had serious path blocking issues, and I don't think they stood up, and I don't think either of those guys are great at pass blocking, and Fluker especially, I think, is challenged there. But part of the solution to that's not going to be at the guard position. I think unless internally they decide to stop being so sunny about Jermaine Ifedi and go to George Fant or go to Jamarco Jones, I think that's going to continually hold him back almost no matter what they do at the guard position.
One of the other things that jumped out to me too is how many ex-Seahawks are free agents this year. Like, I was going through the list. There was like a portion where there was like 4 in a row. We mentioned Golden Tate. We mentioned Earl. Carpenter, Golden Tate, Jermaine Kearse, Brandon Mebane. There's a ton of them.
Although Mebane's retiring, right?
Yeah, Bruce Irvin. Luke Wilson. Are any of those guys worth bringing back?
Well, I think Carpenter has to be in that discussion of competition for Sweezy or Fluker, right? It's in that if you don't want to go with one of those guys, he's a guy that you could kick the tires on. I mean, Luke Wilson's another one. Like, he is absolutely nothing special. But if he's cheap and, he can be a serviceable tight end in that mix with Dixon and Disley and Vinette, like, I have no problem bringing him back.
What about Pierre Desir or Mark Lewinsky? They're both free agents too, unrestricted.
Well, you're going to have to pay for them now.
Yeah, and Indianapolis has like $17 trillion in cap space. Those guys aren't going anywhere, I don't think. I would definitely bring him back. I would happily take Desir over maybe either of our cornerbacks. I'm not sure about that, but I definitely would like to have him as an option. And Glowinski, yeah, slide him in at guard. He's 26. I mean, that's a miss. He's a quality guard now. The Colts fired their offensive line coach though. Like, after that team had like maybe the best offensive line in the league this year. Weird.
Apparently, Reich inherited him and wanted his own guy. The NFL is so dumb sometimes.
Yeah, the Colts' #1 personnel guy behind the GM is an ex-Seahawks guy, Ed Dodds. So the fact that they got those guys there is not surprising. They've brought in a lot of Seahawks players. But yeah, that move was very bizarre. Another thing we haven't touched on today, it was a huge story across the country. The Lions hired Darrell Bevell as OC. Bevell was out of the league last year after Seattle fired him. Let's go with Nathan on this one. We'll start with you. How do you think he does outside of Tom Cable now? There was all that weird. Cable ran the run game. Bevell ran the pass game. Now that Bevell's in full control of an offense, how do you think he does?
I really don't know. I would be fairly optimistic if I was a Lions fan. But I don't know. I was never in the camp that was particularly impressed by Bevell. I know he's got a lot of fans in Seattle. It's so hard to untangle him and Cable and understand like who is doing what and how much did Cable torpedo Bevell. I mean, Russ certainly had, Russ's best stretch of his career was second half of 2015, and that was Bevell, or with Bevell anyways. And so I would be optimistic. I would not be mad if I was a Lions fan, but I'm excited to kind of watch it from afar and see how that shakes out.
What about you, Brian? You've been the Tom Cable defender. Are you a Bevell defender too?
Can't believe that is where. See, what happens is everybody stands on one side of the boat. So when I stand in the middle, it looks like I'm like on the other side of the planet. Yeah, I mean, I think Bevell's fine. I wanted him fired after the Super Bowl. Like, I think that he was irreparably damaged, and the team needed him to be gone at that point. The locker room needed him to be gone, at least to have some kind of scapegoat. I never was super excited about his scheme or his system. I know there's guys in that locker room that think very highly of him, and I think a lot of people think he is a better play caller and maybe a better offensive coordinator in general than Brian Schottenheimer, which I don't think is unlikely. I don't think that's a super high bar, to be totally honest. But, he seems like a nice guy. Wish him well. I think he's like milk toast. He's probably better than 60% of the offensive coordinators in the NFL. So I think he's better than most, but I would not be super excited to have him as an OC. Can I change the subject real quick? I know we were talking.
Yeah.
One other name, like safety. We all talked about safety being big. What do we think the market's going to be like for Honey Badger and whether or not he's an interesting fit? He's 27, to safety, played for Houston this year. Is he a guy that, if you pair him with Bradley McDougald, do you feel better about the Seahawks next year?
Oh, yeah. And I think you could get him at a fairly decent rate, too. What was he paid last year? Do you have the contract up?
$7 million.
Yeah, I bet he lands probably around that. I will say this. I'd rather do the Honey Badger than Earl Thomas.
What?
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. There's an emotional mentality problem here. You cannot tell me there's not bad blood between the Seahawks and Earl Thomas. Earl Thomas fucking flipped off the sidelines. He flipped off Pete Carroll. He flipped off the Seahawks franchise. He flipped off the executives. He flipped off the coaches. He flipped off the players. You cannot tell me there's not bad blood there. Are you kidding me? The Seahawks messed with his checkbook. They messed with his wallet. They messed with his bank account. You cannot tell me there isn't bad blood there.
Maybe, but who cares? Bring him back, pay him. If we're talking about paying Honey Badger $7 or $8 million or Earl $10 million, give Earl the 10.
No. Earl's getting more than 10. I am telling you, I am convinced Earl wants to break that APY number that Eric Berry has at 13 point something.
I'm sure he does, but is he gonna get that?
If he hits the open market, he might.
See, this is why I think how they handled this entire thing is really unfortunate. And I mean, really, they should have just traded him. And because you're right, he wanted to get paid, and so maybe there was no way around this. But I suspect Earl's going to get out there, and he is not going to find quite the money he thinks he's going to find. But I agree that there also is bad blood, and I just don't think he'll come back. But if this is somehow in a vacuum, I'm much more interested in paying Earl and trying to smooth over any bad blood that they may have had,
of course,
than giving Matthew, who I don't know. Personally, never been super impressed with Matthew, so that's part of it. But yeah.
What about someone like Trey Boston, 27, Eric Reed, who I don't know if that'll happen or not. Looking down.
Well, and so this is the thing. I would love to see Earl come back, and I would love to see them find, like I said, all the stuff I said earlier, right? Find a price point that works for everybody. But that safety market is just not that lucrative, and I would, if they have to end up going and look for the next McDougald, and just kind of maybe waiting out the market and see who kind of slips through the cracks, I think that's not a bad way to go. I mean, they have to do something. They have to either have somebody that they're targeting relatively high in the draft, or or a free agent or somebody to come in and compete, because Tedrick is not good enough, not nearly good enough. But trying to kind of take advantage of what isn't a really robust safety market is probably a smart way to look at it.
Let me give you another name. 25 years old, Landon Collins.
You just stole it right out of my mouth. That's the guy I've been looking at the whole time. I don't know if he'll hit the market, but if he does, I think that's the exact kind of guy they need to target.
He is going to get paid, though, right?
Oh, yeah. I'd pay him, though.
I don't know that he's been playing very well the last couple of years. He had a massive year maybe 2 years ago. I don't think I'm looking right now. I'll have to do a little more research. Landon Collins was not graded very well by Pro Football Focus, that's for sure, this last year. His grades over the last few years, he was an 81 in 2016, an 82 last year, and a 70 this year. So he had a pretty drastic drop off. But 25 years old, the guy has shown clear all-pro talent. He was in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year a few years ago. Definitely been a playmaker, can rush the passer, can support against the run, can make plays on the ball, cause interceptions. I'd be happy to have someone like that paired with Mr. McDougal for a couple of years.
Yeah, it seems like he's recovering from a torn something in his shoulder, if I'm reading this correctly. So there might be some injury stuff, like as recent as December, though.
You get him with Pete Carroll, who's great at developing defensive backs. I'd like to see how he played in this system versus the Giants, who are kind of a one-man crew back there, and a lot of guys have left that city or not city team and gotten a lot better. So I don't know how much worry I'd have about his performance this year, because you put him in this system, which is completely different than what they do. That's the kind of guy, but I don't think he hits the market. I think a lot of the names at the top of the list we'll look at. If you look at most free agent lists, it's mostly defensive ends and guys like Collins who are at the top of the list, and a lot of them will be franchised. So that's why I got like Covington and Jarrett. Those guys are interesting names because those guys are probably going to hit the market. Another guy that interested me a little bit is Brandon Graham, defensive end from Philly. I don't know how old he is.
31.
He's 31, so a little high in age, but defensive ends play well into their 30s. But he's a guy who makes plays on the ball. He strip sacks. Seattle's had issues with turnovers, and they have their secondary concerns. So getting defensive line better, and we talked about defensive tackle and pressure, that can kind of hide the weakness in the secondary a little bit. So I think it's really important, if whether it's the draft or a guy like Graham, or there's so many defensive ends in this class, Ziggy Ansah, D Ford. If you can pair a guy like that with Clark, that should make the secondary better, right?
Yeah. Interesting one. Go ahead.
Oh no, I mean, just the more we talk about this, the less excited for free agency I am. Like, I mean, I'd love for them to land a Clowney or something like that. It'd be great if they could bring Earl back or something, but they're gonna have a lot of cap space, and some of it's gonna have to go to their own guys. But like, I just don't know who's blowing my socks off in this class. Like, I think I missed part of it because my internet cut out on me for a bit, but talking about whether this is going to be a pivotal year or how important this year is for John Schneider, and I don't know what it'll mean in terms of like hot seat or anything like that, but his ability to kind of sift through all these middle to low level names that we're talking about and find the next guys that can step in and be contributors that aren't going to be Jerome Browns that we're going to try to be cutting the very next year. It's going to go a long ways to how much better this team can get, because again, they don't have anything in the draft. I mean, 4 picks, it's not enough. They're going to trade down, but it's not going to be enough, and so they're going to have to find some really creative ways to get this team better.
What about I'm throwing another name out there I think you do like, Nathan, Jason Verrett, cornerback for the Chargers, been often injured, going to have his value challenged because of it. 28 years old, and when he's been healthy, he has been one of the best corners in football. Is that a guy that's potentially lower cost, higher upside?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the perfect position to do it, right? I mean, if you add Verrett to this group of Quill and Flowers and Coleman, and he doesn't give you anything, well, it's not the end of the world. You want to get better there, but it's not going to kill them if they don't, right? And they'll find some mid-round guys. They'll try to find another Trey Flowers or whatever. But Verrett, if you do get him and he is cheap and he actually puts together, a season, which he's never done. The most he's ever played is 14 games. His other seasons are 6 games, 4 games, and 1 game. So, really unlikely that he gives you anything, but he's a nice gamble for that spot and for what they need.
All right, here's a name. This is mostly a troll, Evan. I do not want them to sign this guy, but Clay Matthews is a free agent. Evan, how would you feel about that move? Him and Pete Carroll go way back.
The most overrated piece of shit in the NFL.
John Schneider drafted him.
Clay Matthews, he's the most overrated defender in the last decade. I'm not kidding.
I mean, he's had 10, 13, 13, and 11 sack years. That's pretty strong.
People just like him because he's a white guy with long hair. I'm
Also,
serious.
the sacks are good.
Who sacks the quarterback, or at least used to? Yeah, I don't think there's much to him now. Like, he's definitely been in the decline. I mean, one of my questions, Jeff, and I guess maybe this is an Evan thing, like, do the Seahawks need to sign Russell to an extension this offseason? We keep talking about it. We keep talking about Bobby. Like, seems to me like they got to sign Frank because they got to sign him. Those other ones, are they more just like opportunistic to use the cap space they have? Do they have to sign those guys this offseason?
Well, the answer is no. Do they have to? No. But like historically, they have extended those players a year before they hit free agency.
Yeah.
I don't think I would sign Russell yet. And it's nothing against Russell. I think.
But what's the advantage? What's the advantage from the team side to wait? Quarterback
So you can use
expensive every day.
Yeah. Well,
And you can front load too, right?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, so why would Russell want to resign then?
Well, he won't.
I mean,
There's the rub.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, security, injury security, but we know Wilson is willing to bet on himself. So,
Yeah, and I think Wilson's agent is a baseball guy, and baseball players aren't like football. They like to hit the market. They want to maximize their value. And the franchise tag and what happened with Kirk Cousins, I think that's very appealing to Russell's camp. And all that talk that the Seahawks misused Russell in the playoffs, somewhere Mark Rodgers is counting his checks. That's the best thing that could have happened to him. That narrative is incredible. So I don't see why he's going to re-sign with Brian Schottenheimer right now.
I don't think that is necessarily hot takey at all. In fact, I think it's the reality. We all joke about trading Russell Wilson, letting Russell Wilson walk, but I think his agent is very, very serious about reevaluating whether Seattle is the best team for him moving forward. And I hate to say that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I get why that's a big bombshell potentially, but man, you know, if the Seahawks really get that as clear sign that they're going to ask for money that the Seahawks can't commit to, I'll tell you what I told you guys in the chat. Like, all right, then Seattle maybe needs to make that call and move on. Like, as crazy as that sounds, like having Russell wait them out, get 2 franchise tags and walk for nothing, that's disaster. You think the Earl thing is confusing and a major problem. You think the Bennett thing was a stupid move. You think the Cam contract was really bad. Those are all like microscopic dots on an elephant's ass compared to letting your franchise quarterback walk for no compensation. So like, if that really is where it ends up, and they're like, I mean, Russell signed his last deal like the eve of the first day of before the first day of training camp, right? Like the last possible moment. If they don't get that now and they get signs that he's not going to re-up, I mean, take the draft picks, move on. And people think that's crazy, but there's a lot fewer teams looking for franchise quarterbacks right now than there ever have been, I think. There's a lot more quarterbacks coming out. It's a passing-friendly league. It's not as hard to have a passing offense. Not to say Russell isn't like, I'm super happy to have him, but I would rather have 3 draft picks than nothing if he's going to walk.
I think that's a terrible idea, but they have to have.
Wait a second, though. What's a terrible idea? Letting him walk or taking 3 draft picks if you think he is going to walk?
How long are we going to just let this team piss away talent because they can't get along with them? Sherm's gone. They should have traded Sherm early, right? Because again, they should have seen where that was going. But that's it. That relationship was soured. The Earl relationship soured. The Bennett relationship not great. Now we're talking about Russell just leaving because he doesn't want to be here. How much talent do Pete and John get to scare away? It seems a little ridiculous. Why can't these? Why do these relationships turn bad every time?
Well, so you're looking at it that way. Are you saying that you would pay Russell whatever he wants?
Pretty much. Yeah, I mean, I have no idea of setting the new QB market with him. I think that's fine. Because again, think about all the players that we're talking about here. You're going to pay Russ all this money, and oh no, he's going to make more than 15% of the cap, and you're not going to be able to sign, Trey Boston or, James Carpenter. We talked about bringing in James Carpenter. Who pay your good players? Pay Russ. He's the main reason this team was any good this year.
I don't think that in the scenario I was talking about, I'm not talking about a situation where the Seahawks are yeah, we're not going to pay you, or we're not going to let you set the market. I think that's totally fine that he sets the market. I think I've been consistent about that. But if Russ is nope.
But why is he nope? Why? He just wants to leave just because?
Put yourself in Russell Wilson's shoes right now. Put yourself in Mark Rodgers' shoes right now, his agent. Do you think Seattle is the best place for his career from 2 perspectives? To win Super Bowls in the next 5 to 10 years and to make as much money as possible. Is Seattle that best place? You're not a Seahawks fan right now. You are Russell Wilson and you are Mark Rodgers. Is Seattle the best place?
No.
I agree.
Where's better? Where's he going to go?
Any offense that caters to his talents, maximizes his usage, lets him throw the ball in the playoffs.
You mean an offense that helps him set his career highs for passing touchdowns year after year and lead the fourth-ranked offense? And
his career highs. I mean, you're comparing him to his career in Seattle. When's Jared Goff a free agent?
A couple of years.
Yeah, I think he has 2 more years left on his deal.
Okay, I mean, either way, Russ could be a free agent. He could go to LA. He could go play with Sean McVay. Right?
That would hurt me.
Tom Brady ain't gonna play forever.
Oh no! Oh god.
No, I mean really though. There are places that if Russ decided to force his way out, he could go find better opportunities.
Yeah.
Right. But whatever you think of him, if he decided to do that, I'm sure a lot of people would not like Russ as a person anymore. The fact of the matter is that we're talking about whether, I mean, this is the old thing, right? If Russ is I can't be successful here, I want to go play for Sean McVay or somebody that lets me throw the ball, and you're going to say, no, we're going to keep shoddy. We're going to keep to this thing. And you're just going to you're just going to sour that relationship and let him leave. That doesn't seem like the right answer.
Jeff, what's your thought there?
Here's one for you guys. The LA Chargers.
There you
Seattle
go.
likes LA. Philip Rivers is getting old. That's a place where Russell can make some money, but I don't know. I think Russell, the thing will get negotiated, and it's not the most exciting take, but I think that with the 2 franchise tags, Seattle's in a good spot. But yeah, I get what Evan's saying. If you're Russell, you probably want to play with a great offensive line, or you want to play with a great receiver, or you want to play an offense that's going to make him the focal point. But yeah, it's hard to think because what's Russell's reputation in those articles, those takedown articles? That he's all about himself and he's not friendly with his teammates, and if he leaves to just because he wants to better his stats? Does that help his reputation? I have a lot of questions. And Russell ends every interview with "Go Hawks." All of a sudden, he bails to chase the money. I don't know. I just see the thing. I think he really likes playing for Pete Carroll. I think they align a lot. As much as we complain about his philosophy offensively, I think they align a lot in terms of like their positive thinking and always thinking they have a chance. I think the two of them really do like playing for each other. So I don't know how long Pete's going to stick around for. So I think that's a huge factor. But yeah, I see where the agent's coming from. If I'm the agent, I'm using all those the Warren Sharp tweets. I'm framing that and I'm bringing that to every single negotiation I have. Because if I'm him, that's gold. You want everyone saying Russell's amazing. Seattle blew it. Brian, you look like your head's about to explode. So
I just think it's such like I want to swear, but I'm not going to. He's going to do better than being the second winningest team in the NFL over his career. Like that's what he's in such a bad situation that he's going to go from being a top 5 DVOA offense in like almost 5 out of his 7 years or whatever to being something better than that he's going to throw more than 36 touchdowns because there's so many quarterbacks throwing more than 36 touchdowns a year. Like,
if that's true,
it's ridiculous.
Well, if that's true and everything is rosy and great here, then there's no reason that he'd force his way out.
It's ridiculous to
Why
say
would he be unhappy?
That he's just going to like, and this notion that like he gets a pass for, yes, he wants to win, but he also wants to maximize how much money he makes, which is totally antithetical to winning. Let's not pretend that it's not. Like he doesn't need the extra 10 million, and his team could have a much better shot at winning no matter where he plays, whether it's Seattle or otherwise. So like this idea that the problem is simply that, Seattle ran too much this year. Like that's just crazy.
Well, then why did you throw out the idea that he might just get tagged twice and then walk? Why would he be unhappy?
That's up to him. That's Evan was the one who put that out there. So I'm saying if he's planning to leave, then I want something in return before he goes. That's what I was saying. I don't think that's a hot take at all.
Would you fire Shoddy though to keep him?
Sure. I have no attachment to Shoddy, but I would be really careful about letting your players run your organization all the way up to the owner. I think that's a sign of real challenge, and I think you're setting yourself up for some really troublesome inverse leader. Tom Brady does not get personnel decision over what's going on in New England, and he's the best player that's ever played that position. Bill Belichick makes every decision. Better be damn sure about that. So I don't know. I think I love that everyone loves Russell here. I love Russell. I'm happy he's our quarterback. He's the best quarterback we've ever had. But like this religious fanaticism about the fact that everything needs to revolve around him, it's like bizarre to me. Like I'm a Seahawks fan. Russell is a Seahawk. As soon as he's on some other team, I'll cheer for him. I hope he does well.
But you just rattled off all these great things about the offense and the touchdowns and this and that. Of course, people should be concerned about keeping him in it should revolve around him. He's fantastic, and they should find a way to – and if they're going to pay him, they should find a way to maximize his value. Like, it's not really that surprising that people like Russell and people want him to be put in the best position to succeed because he's the player that has the most influence on the team's ability to succeed, and he's one of the best players, in the league.
Yeah. I've been very consistent. Like, there's been people that say, we should fire Pete Carroll. We can't keep them both. I'm happy that they extended Pete Carroll. I think that they should pay Russell Wilson. I think it's a pretty simple decision. The conversation we're having, Nathan, is if Russell decides he does not want to take that money, do you just you literally fire the coach, you fire the GM, you start all over, and you wait and let Russell then pick who? Is that literally what you're saying? That he should then be able to go to the owner and pick who the coach and the GM are? Where does it stop?
I don't. I don't know. Would that be the worst thing?
Like, where does it stop?
I don't know. I mean, would that be the worst thing?
Oh my God!
No, like,
Come on! What world are you living in?
this one, the same one as you. Like, you have a really fantastic player. You want to keep him. He doesn't want to play for the coach.
I don't want to do this much more because I feel like this is like.
I actually like. I honestly don't know. Like,
that's not a good look, dude.
Who cares how it looks? Like, it's about having talent and winning games. Like,
I mean, at the end of the day, Brian, Russell Wilson is way more important to this franchise than Pete Carroll.
Wrong. 100% wrong.
God.
Pete Carroll didn't have a winning record until Russell came.
Ooh.
Like, you can pretend that they can recreate the LOB, or you can try to go back and let them, trade for the next Charlie Whitehurst. But this team has a terrible record with quarterbacks outside of Russ, and, Pete Carroll has a losing record outside of Russ. So what if Russ wants to blow it up and is willing to stay here?
I'm not gonna get into that. That is the most ridiculous notion that the quarterback gets to decide who the coach and the GM of the organization is. If that's where you're gonna go, I don't think there's any conversation to be had.
I don't think it's a ridiculous idea. I don't think it's something that every team should do, but I don't think it's a ridiculous idea. Well, hey, look, didn't Aaron Rodgers just kind of do it with Mike McCarthy?
Hold up. Doesn't LeBron James do this?
That's kind of who I keep thinking about. Like, I've seen basketball players do this for a while now. LeBron, he's doing all right.
LeBron calls the shots.
Yeah, how many championships has he had recently?
One.
More championships than Russell Wilson has.
No.
Yes. LeBron has won a championship more recently than Russ.
Yeah, more recently, but he hasn't had more in the last, same set of time. Like, anyway, if that's
doesn't he have more? If you go back to like 2012, doesn't he have more?
Than 2012? I don't know. I'd have to go back and look.
I mean, if you want to really slice your time window just right, I mean, you can get it so that they have the same amount, but
right.
And we're also talking about like one of the, all-time dynasties of sports with the Warriors that they've been going against. But yeah, anyway.
We're talking about the best player that's maybe ever played the sport. Do you believe that Russell Wilson is better than Tom Brady, Drew Brees right now? That's only two players.
No, if you're in the right offense, he easily could be.
Or he could be.
Could be. Are you kidding?
No, I know.
He could be better than Tom Brady if he was in a different offense. That's what your position is.
Yes. Yes.
Oh my God.
Are you kidding me?
We are losing all credibility on this show.
Is that
the most homer take of all time?
Russell Wilson has been dealing with a bullshit offensive line for like the first 9 years of his career. When have you ever had a pass blocking unit like above rank 25?
Yeah, honest to God, if Russ had actually thrown his weight around a little bit more and gotten Cable fired a few years sooner, maybe he would have more rings than LeBron James recently. Like, he probably could have made some better coaching decisions than Pete has the last 5 years.
It's true. Russ deserves all the credit.
It's not that. It's just like he's extremely good. He has won countless Super Bowls and division titles since he did not have the benefit of one of the best defenses in the history of the NFL. Right? It was just Russ. It wasn't that defense. That defense had nothing to do with it. It was Who's taking away from the defense? Who's taking away from the defense?
You are. You're saying
how?
Russ. Pete had a losing record. The only difference was Russ. That was the only difference.
I mean, they went from a 7-9 team to like a top DVOA team. The difference was Russ. Like, literally, that was the difference. The defense, very, very good. Not taking anything away from it. But like, let's not sit here and pretend that Russ isn't like critical to this team's success.
I'm not pretending that. I see it as a team sport.
And do you think that they're going to recreate the LOB?
Entire team, down to every player, every coach, every the personnel decision was Pete Carroll. Every single one.
And is he going to do it again?
Including Russell Wilson, including making the decision to let him be picked.
Is he going to do it again?
Allow him to be the starter as a rookie.
Is he going to do it again? Is Pete going to do it again?
Gonna do what again?
Is he going to build the greatest defense of all time again?
No.
Well, then what is the attachment? Russ is still one of the best quarterbacks in the league. If we don't think Pete can do what he did that got him to the Super Bowl in the first place, why are we so worried about keeping him around? Why wouldn't we let Russ throw his weight around a little bit and make some decisions? Like, again, if this had happened and he had forced Cable out sooner, this team probably would have been more successful the last few years. And that was just a flaw in Pete. That was him being too loyal for too long.
Right. And Russell Wilson has no flaws?
No, of course he has flaws.
What are his flaws, Nathan?
What?
What are his? Yeah, exactly. What? Wait,
like, what is the point? Like,
Russell Wilson can't have flaws. He's
no, of course he does.
He's
oh my
better
God.
than Tom Brady. The only reason he's better than Tom Brady is because he's not on another team. That's the only reason, obviously, because he clearly, he makes every pass. He is perfect at pre-snap reads. He's perfect at short and intermediate throws. He's perfect at making all the right decisions. He has always done well when he's in a high volume passing offense. Every single time he's made every right decision. So the only thing holding him back is coaching, right? It's obvious. I don't know why I didn't see that before.
Are we trying to argue that he wouldn't be better in McVay's offense or in Belichick's offense?
No, I'm not trying.
And you already rattled off all of his accomplishments, that he throws all these touchdowns. He's got this very good offense, right? Like, so he would be even better in other places. Yes, he has flaws, but I think the idea of him pushing, the idea that he's going to get the GM fired and the coach fired, this is just wild speculation at this point. But the idea that this team wouldn't be better off with him pushing them to be more aggressive, to be more modern, to pass more, it's that's 100% true. They would be better if he pushed Pete in the ways that Pete needs to be pushed. And Russell will be better if they get coaches that push Russell in the way that Russ needs to be pushed. So
is that a flaw in Russell there? Is he too passive?
Yeah, that's the flaw. There you go. That's how he's not perfect, is he didn't push Pete. No, Russell isn't perfect, and Russell needs someone to hold him accountable and all that stuff.
Do you want him more like Aaron Rodgers?
I don't think it would hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And not to the point, and Pete Carroll is not Mike McCarthy. Pete Carroll doesn't need to be fired.
Offensively?
Right? All right, offensively maybe. But the idea that this team wouldn't be better with, Russ holding their feet to the fire a little bit and, having that mentality of accountability going the other direction, I think is perfectly reasonable. I don't think it's a bad thing when players great players like LeBron or Russell or Aaron Rodgers or whoever push their team to be better.
Yeah.
Isn't that what Sherman did all those years?
Why is that worth saying?
Because you seem to be arguing with it.
No, of course players should be pushing their team to be better. Always.
And they should be pushing the coaches to be better. And if you're a player of Russell's stature and you have coaches that have clear limitations that refuse to get better, then you should try to push them out or push yourself out. That's neither selfish nor a bad strategy.
So here's what worries me. Who's Russell complaining about this to? This is a big picture issue. Who's above Pete right now?
It's just Pete, right? I mean,
I know that's a scary thing of what you guys are arguing. Who is he arguing to?
Did Wilson?
Judy Allen?
Did Wilson's comments to the media at the end of the season not kind of make any of you nervous? You remember that? The comments after the Cowboys game?
Yeah, it didn't. I mean, I think it's clear how he feels, right? I mean, but I don't think I'm nervous about this. I think we are wildly speculating at this point that.
Sure, but those types of comments from Russell are a pretty big deal. Remember, this is robot Russell, who only says optimistic things. This was him being semi-critical, and it was kind of interesting to see.
Well, and it'll be interesting to see how the coaching staff takes it, because again, we've joked about it all year long, right? But they've made a big deal about accountability, and will they hold themselves accountable? Again, not needing to fire anybody or anything like that necessarily, but I think that the coaches, the offensive game plan was a massive cluster in the most important game of the year, and it caused them to lose. And there needs to be some introspection about that.
Do you guys see Jake Heap's comment the other day about the offense?
I did, but I don't remember what they were.
I think Heath said that this year was about setting an identity, and next year is about building on the passing game. Do you buy that at all, or is that just him?
It is obviously what's going to happen. Like the whole, this is all a tempest in a teacup about people that just want it to be all about passing. If you look at the Seahawks play calling splits over Pete Carroll's time with Russell Wilson, this year was a total aberration in terms of how much they ran. It was way off the charts in terms of how much more run-centric they were. And the last 2 years were kind of off the charts more being pass-centric than they typically have been. The first few years, like 2012 to 2015, it was roughly 50-50. And so I think there's a lot of evidence that they kind of looked at what they had and that they weren't able to pass protect worth crap this year and made an adjustment. And they were able to go from having one of the worst run games in history last year to having one of the better ones in the league, if not the best. And so now they know that they can do that. That's good. Next year's absolutely going to be about getting more into the passing game, more balance. I think that's all pretty obviously where they're going to go.
I don't know that that's obvious at all, but we'll see.
Yeah, that is my expectation.
Okay, Evan, you're not a Pete Carroll guy. So you saw all these guys get hired, all the passing coordinators, everyone who knew Sean McVay from his quarterback to the guy in Green Bay who McVay didn't even keep. When you see these guys getting hired, are you jealous? Or would you have wanted one of those guys to replace Pete?
Everybody thinks like I want to fire Pete Carroll like right now. I really like Pete Carroll.
Dude, that's bull.
No,
you would see such a wuss on this. All big things on Twitter, and then you come on here and you're like, oh, I like Pete. He's an okay guy.
Let me say
he's different completely than who he is. But other than that, I really like him.
Okay, let me lay down the fucking law. Pete Carroll needs to fucking adapt from his goddamn archaic offense from the fucking 1200s, 1200 BC. He needs to adapt to the modern era. And if he refuses to grow, fire his ass right fucking now. Get him out of Seattle right now. Because you know what? If he's going to be a part of the problem, he's not going to be part of the solution. And we are not going to win a Super Bowl with him unless he adapts, he grows, and he centers this team around Russell Wilson. We will not win another Super Bowl with him. I guarantee you, if he does not grow, he does not adapt, he does not evolve,
Throw the caveat.
we're all going to be 95 years old, and we're going to be celebrating that one Super Bowl win in fucking 2014. That's just the story. I'll tell you how it ends. That's it.
You clearly love Pete Carroll. I don't know why I was thinking otherwise.
I want Pete Carroll to adapt. He'd be so good if he got a little bit better offensively. Just a little bit. Just a little. Please.
Better than fourth in scoring.
Oh, Christ.
Better than fourth. I'm just asking, is he only good if he's first in scoring in the NFL?
Did he adjust and adapt well in the Cowboys game?
No, of course not. That's known. Even Schottenheimer admitted that. So I don't know why that's even a discussion point. Of course they did that game.
Shotty's interview this week on Brock and Salk was ugly.
Hold on. So yeah, he that was a problem for that game. So for the year though, they were the fourth in the NFL in scoring on offense. What is the bar? How high do they have to be for it to be good enough?
I don't think they're saying that, though. I think they're saying what they did this year isn't sustainable based on Russell's big plays and third downs. And I think that's more of a problem than their total offensive production. Am I wrong here?
No, that's pretty much it. Yeah, they have to make better. They need to make better decisions in key situations, and they need to construct the offense a little bit more soundly. And maybe they only go from fourth to third, or maybe they stay at fourth, or maybe they go from fourth to fifth. But you can't have games like the Cardinals game, the Dallas game. Like, you have to be able to
Guys,
adapt.
guys, if that's true, wouldn't the evidence be that the Seahawks there would be wild variance in the Seahawks scoring much more than other teams? They're like either big hit or big miss, right? Like, if that would be the evidence that ultimately it is scoring, like either you score points and you win or you don't score points and you lose. Like, it is about scoring ultimately, not how you do it stylistically, but do you score or do you not? They did that better than all but 3 teams in the NFL this year. And they also, I have to go back and look, but I'm pretty sure I saw a stat. There was only like 4 or 5 teams in the NFL that didn't score less than 17 points in a game this year, and the Seahawks were one of them. So they also scored pretty consistently, and they scored 27 or more in like 12 of 14 games or something like that. Like, they were scoring a lot of points. They averaged over 30 points a game over the last half of the year. So, like, I'm just calling bull a little bit about, yeah, like, of course there's more efficiency to be had on offense. Of course there is. Like, and maybe they can get better. Maybe they can be the first overall scoring offense, but the fact that that's where all the focus is, I don't get it. Like, I think I would take a top 5 DVOA offense, which they were not this year, but they've been plenty of times during Pete Carroll's era. I would take that every year. And I would definitely take a top 4 scoring offense every year. Don't care how they got to it. If they're top 4, I will take that every single year. Offense is not the problem from my perspective. Russell Wilson is a huge asset there, and he's helping. So let him continue to help. And show me how you get this defense to not be doing this, which is allowing more points every single year. And who are you going to bring in that's going to fix that better than Pete Carroll?
Well, that's happening under Pete Carroll.
Yeah.
So maybe somebody else could do it better than Pete Carroll, because
Name it.
Pete Carroll's not doing it very good.
Name it. I mean, like, so
I don't know. Here's the thing that's frustrating about these conversations that we have is we just constantly like push the blame. Like, Schneider's in the top 20% of GMs, but they have no picks and they have no talent and they have all these needs. But Pete, it's not Pete's fault, because nobody's going to come in and coach this defense better, even though the defense is the problem and the points go up every year. And, the offense is limited, but hey, they're 4th in points, but we know they could do more, but it's nobody's fault because they were already good. Like, who at some point, the problems on this team have to land somewhere.
You're right. The second winningest team over the last 9 years that's made the playoffs almost every year.
I mean, again, like, how do we
narrowing down who to blame for that major problem?
We've had a lot of complaints on this podcast, and seemingly no one is to blame for them. Like, the defense is no good. There's no talent on the defense, but it's not the coach's fault. It's not the GM's fault. Like, well, at some point, the buck has to stop somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think, if that's the message you're getting, of course there's blame. Like, there's no doubt. And it always ultimately goes to the coach, as well as the freaking credit, guys. Like, you don't get to just find the problems and lay those at his feet, and then all the credit goes to the player, or a player in particular. That just doesn't make any sense at all.
I mean, I think you can I don't think you just assign all credit and all blame to the coach. I think you can be a little bit more, discerning than that.
But I mean, ultimately, it all rolls up to Pete. I mean, even personnel. So I mean, ultimately, it is him. And I think Jeff's question was a great one. Who of the coaches that got hired so far do you feel like would put the Seahawks in a much better position than they are right now? That not only would lead us offense to be higher than 4th in the NFL in scoring, but also figure out how to address the defensive issues that need to be addressed.
Well, I think the offensive question is pretty simple. I think a lot of these coaches could do this or more with the offense, right? I mean, again, earlier on we said
Gase.
Yeah, sure. Like, how good is Shoddy? You like Shoddy?
You'd rather have Adam? No. Carroll. He's a head coach.
Well, okay, but here's the thing: was the defense good this year?
No.
Is Shoddy a good offensive coordinator?
No.
So how hard could it be to replace what this team did? If you think most coordinators are better than Shoddy, and the defense wasn't very good, then you could probably hire Adam Gase and have a not very good defense and maybe even a better offense, and this team would maybe be in a better situation. Like, again, like we can't keep pushing things around. Like, at some point, somebody's responsible for it.
I don't think there's any doubt who's responsible for it. It's Pete Carroll. So the question is, who's better, and what's the plan to get that to happen?
Right, and earlier on, we did say too that we thought a lot of the win now stuff was about Pete, and so the reason that they may have trouble restocking on talent in this kind of transition phase for them, which a very successful transition phase, no doubt, but it is a transition phase. Well, they've got 4 draft picks, right, and like so. Again, if Pete's not adding a lot on the defense and he's not adding a lot on the offense, and we think he's part of the problem for why they are why they're a little limited in how they can restock the talent of this team, like, I don't know, like, kind of keeps coming back to Pete. And which is, again, not to say that he needs to be fired or anything like that, but like this idea that, who would have gotten this team to where they are, like only Pete Carroll, like, I don't really buy that.
Yeah,
there's a lot of coaches out there that I think could have done this.
That's clear. I mean, yeah, I think that you've got a team that nationally was largely expected to win 4 to 6 games and won 10 and made the playoffs and should have potentially won more. So if you're down on the coaching job at that point, I don't know what else to say. And yeah, I absolutely think that the defense was super light on talent this year. And I think that they did a lot of work developing those players. And I think that almost any other coach, that would have been a bottom 5 defense in all major numbers. And I think Pete's a major reason why it wasn't. So, that's my point of view. Clearly not yours, which makes this a fun discussion. But God have mercy on your souls when we have the next coach in here and you guys are probably not on here because you just can't watch Seahawks football anymore. Like, it's going to be so bad.
Oh, yeah, scoring so many touchdowns. Yeah, it's going to be really
all
tough.
those 50 touchdown seasons from Russell Wilson. It'll be so difficult to watch.
So many season MVPs. Oh, God. Passing the ball on first down. Can you imagine? Could you imagine?
Pete doesn't call the offensive plays.
Okay, but Pete can interject.
We've seen him do it. It's why Carson didn't play in the second game, right? In the Bears game. I mean,
I don't love Pete. I like Pete a lot, and I think you guys shortchange a lot of what he does, but Pete gets a lot of blame from offensive play. Pete doesn't call offensive plays. Most defensive coaches hands their offense to someone else.
Hold up. Shoddy is executing Pete's identity. But
he doesn't call the plays. You can have an identity and pass the ball on first down.
Yes, but the Seahawks don't do it.
Yeah, and that's Shoddy.
But who does Shoddy report to? And who can change that?
Yeah, but Darrell Bevell did. And how good was the offense?
Yeah, I no lie, I kind of miss Darrell Bevell.
He did the first 2 weeks of the season too. 66% of the time he passed on early downs.
I will shamefully admit, moving on from him, I think that was a bad take from me.
I get what you guys are saying offensively. I actually agree with you. I know Evan got really excited with my adapt or die tweet. After that game, I agree with that. And I do agree. And I was reading a book on Bill Walsh from 1968 where he was talking about how only idiots would go run, pass, and set up their quarterbacks to fail on third down. This was in 1968. And Pete's still not doing that. I agree. But I think you guys are mistaking the job of a coordinator versus a head coach. And you're missing what the head coach does. And so much of that just doesn't show. We can't measure it. It's in the culture. It's in the job. So, yeah, I think the biggest area Pete's failed is not doing what Dan Quinn did the first time he was hired and pair up with an offensive coordinator that he can hand the offense to. Dan Quinn got Kyle Shanahan. they almost went to the Super Bowl with an elite offense. I think that's been Pete's biggest mistake. I think we look at the on-field stuff and we look at it like you look at a play caller, just based on results of play calling. That's the coordinator's job, not the head coach's job. And what makes McVay so good, and if you talk to all the guys who know him and hear him say it this week, he's not just a play caller. He does all the big picture stuff. He hired Wade Phillips, which is what I just blame Pete for not doing, not taking the guy. And I think Pete really failed 2015 to 17. I think Pete failed in those areas. Not only was the offense terrible, but the team was crumbling around him. And as Nathan said, their state is a lot because of what happened with Pete and Schneider. And I think going forward, we got to evaluate them. And I think what you guys are saying are right. And next year, if the offense stays stagnant and the defense doesn't get better with a talent infusion, then maybe it is time to move on. But I would like to see how he does with better defensive talent.
Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, so straightforward. I don't know why it's so contentious. You've got an offense that's scoring, and yes, we all agree that it could be better, but the results are pretty good. You got a defense that needs to improve, and you need to improve it next year, and they need to have more talent added. So it should be that simple. Like, go work on making the defense better, make the offense better as well. But I think you got a lot more work to do on defense. And look, if they had a better defense this year, you're telling me that they wouldn't potentially be in the NFC Championship right now?
I don't know. That fucking playoff game was stupid.
Oh, hell no. Their offense runs them into the ground. There's no way. They don't put up.
I get why people are contentious. That playoff game was so bad from a coaching standpoint. I was furious for a week.
We got Jeff on board with analytics after that game.
I still think they need to change offensively, and I do blame Pete for that. And I said it with Kyle Shanahan. He's my dream guy that Pete should have paired with years ago. But from a head coaching standpoint, I look around the league and I see Matt LaFleur getting the Green Bay Packer job. And it's like, really? If we could have got Matt Nagy or Fangio or Doug Peterson, or not Fangio, Doug Peterson, one of those guys, I'm on board.
Sure.
But, yeah, if you're looking at these names, Zach Taylor and someone who coached Ryan Tannehill, Adam Gase, and those giant eyes, I just don't see where to go right now. Maybe if you can get Lincoln Riley or something, but I'm stumped where you go. That's better. I just gotta say that got awesome. That debate was awesome. I didn't even say a word for like 20 minutes. I just couldn't have enough.
It's bizarre. Like,
Agreed.
I've never seen a less grateful fan base for the most successful period of time in its history ever. It's ridiculous.
I mean, I'm very thankful for Russell Wilson.
I got nothing more to say.
Guys, that was good.
Yeah, that was fun.
I think we should call it a night. Probably 10 people are still watching.
All right, fellas. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, as you always do. Extra long pod tonight. And we will be going to our bi-weekly. So we'll be with you in a couple of weeks after the NFC Championships happen, right before the Super Bowl. So should be lots to talk about. We'll be getting closer to true off-season when the free agency and all the good stuff happens. Senior Bowl should be going on, so we start talking about draft. A lot of good stuff coming. So good night, everybody. Thank you, and go Hawks.